processing is an important part of what we do in audio, and I feel like pretty much in every session that you're going to work with, you're doing some form of processing if you're going to actually release it or give it to somebody. So whether we're recording and then we're only doing tracking, or whether we're editing or we're mixing down, there's always something that's going to be happening that'll allow us to kind of finalize and give that sound a more professional touch. So when you hear a finalized mix, the processing is really what makes that sound the way that it does. Like the raw voice and a raw snare or raw guitar, they sound very uniquely different than they do on an actual finalized recording. So there's a lot of processing that happens in between. So processing includes things like EQ, compression, limiting, reverb, delay, gating, any other effects that need to be used. So I'm in a session called Crazy Feeling. It's a session I produced and recorded with Daniel Park. And just to kind of highlight and show you just a few things, this is a real simple session. This is a very stripped down version of one of the songs that we did with a lot of other instrumentation in our session. This was one of the songs that literally came down to snare drum, bass guitar, piano, electric guitar, and vocals, and that's it. So real stripped down, bare bones, and it's kind of nice because you can kind of see through and understand what the processing is doing when you're looking at it that way, because there's not so much going on. So let's take a look at a couple things. I'm going to push play, and you can see the sections as they kind of cycle through, but I'm going to bring up the processing that goes with it, and that processing resides in the mix window. So when we flip over to the mix window, the inserts are all up at the top, and by default we have inserts A through E active. If we need a whole other row or another bank full of inserts, down at the bottom we could change this track view to add inserts F through J, and we'd see essentially 10 option slots for inserts. But let's take a listen. Bring these in, and we'll start off with the piano inserts that are up. Right now the piano has an EQ, a compressor, a post EQ compressor, and a little bit of noise reduction in order to kind of get the piano to have the right sound. The piano was recorded with a combination of large diaphragm condenser mics, but then it was also recorded with some ribbon mics that were vintage, and they had a lot of noise on the line, and so that's what the noise suppression is. So let's take a listen.
And our Christmas tree gives me that crazy feeling that I'm loving.
Okay, so let's focus on what's happening with the piano in some spots here. If we really just kind of highlight and get into this first phrase. The noise suppression, you're not going to do a whole lot. It's really just trying to get rid of any of the noise that's in the background, but you should see it barely moving because there's not a whole lot. But if we really focus on everything else, I'm going to bypass these other EQs just so we can kind of take a look at what's going on with this first EQ, and then we can kind of highlight a few things that are being altered. Actually, let's bypass this first EQ as well. So right now we have nothing on it, and we'll just focus on just this initial EQ, talk about what's being changed. So an EQ, of course, is frequency processing, and it's going to be changing the tonality and the timbre of the overall sounds. Let's take a listen. So a couple of things that are being addressed as we kind of listen to this. Let's go ahead and activate this, and we'll check out some elements that are being addressed. First off, that the mids are pulled so they're not as sharp, and we can see it right here. These mids are being just reduced. If they weren't, or if they were back at normal, this is what they would sound like. Of a low-pass filter, which allows us to cut out the highs, and if it was not active, it would sound like this. And we can kind of boost if we wanted more highs. We'll just push play and kind of let you hear a little bit of what this would sound like. And then the compressor is really just jumping in and giving us a little bit more control dynamically. So it's not letting all of those hits just be up and down and up and down. It's giving us a little bit more of a sustained platform underneath. Now, moving on to the snare was actually recorded using a bunch of analog equipment. So it already has, the snare drum already has, it's a combination of mics. This is actually not just a stereo channel. This is a combination of Glenn John's overheads, and so essentially 2 large diaphragm microphones, plus the snare top and bottom to get that feel and that vibe. And then we're running them through a pair of 1176s, vintage 1176s, and then some vintage LA2As, and that's kind of how we get to this tone. And it's running off an SSL console, so it has an SSL EQ already on it, so it's already fairly processed. But that's how we get that real big width. If we really wanted to do some other things with it, we can just kind of just show off, some other options that could be there. If I go to dynamics, I'm gonna go open up the Abbey Road RS-124 and get some space here. Now this is already being run down a reverb, but if I wanted to actually add some slap to it, I have some buses for that. Let's see, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right now it's running through 1 and 2. So if I just ran some delay effects on it, let's just kind of see what that sounds like. 5, 6, and 7, 8. All right, let's take a listen. I'm going to add a multi-delay. And you can see how that really, adds a lot of rhythmic flair to it, and sometimes it actually kind of masks what we're really trying to do with the rhythms. But there's another example of what we can do with processing on the vocal chain. For the vocals, there's a little bit of love there too. We have the SSL EQ. We also have another CLA2A, a little bit of an EQ cut, and then some de-essing. And let's open this up to kind of see what this looks like. So de-essing is a real simple process that just allows us to cut out a little bit of the S's off of the vocal. Let's take a look.
Christmas tree gives me that crazy feeling that I'm loving, baby. Drinks and laughs and all the photographs that make me wonder, do we look younger? Simply wonderful feeling.
Great. You can see every time that hits red, that's that's some sort of sibilance that's coming down, like an S or a T that's being brought down, so it's not too sharp. Now, processing is a really great process, something that's really useful, of course, when we're working. And one thing that I'd note is that there's a lot of places you can get your plugins. There's a lot of great stock plugins, but Waves. A lot of what I'm using is the Waves.com stuff from Waves. You go to Waves.com, and then I use a lot of UAD stuff as well. But you just keep on the lookout for things. There's always a lot of plug-in buzz about products that work really well, and you kind of just have to see which ones fit your budget correctly and which ones are great. For me, every time I have someone starting out that says, what's the first or second plugin I should buy, I usually lead them to the SSL E channel, this one's from Waves, and the SSL compressor, which is the SSL G-Bus comp. The compressor really gives it that glue, and this one's seated on the master.